All right. Welcome to everybody watching this, listening to this, or reading this. I am here with Shawn Murphy. It is an honor to have you here, Shawn. I'm going to be telling the readers a little bit more about you. You are an engineer, a scientist, and you have a very logical way of approaching spirituality. And it is this logic and analysis that helps you create the work that you do today. Um, I had the privilege of reading a chapter from your book called Torn Between Two Worlds: Modern Medicine and Spiritual Healing. And it was delightful. I'm happy to be unpacking that with you today. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful what you've come back to me with, and I'd love to answer your questions about the topic of raising spiritual children.
Absolutely. So, a little bit of context, Sean. The reason this topic is very important to me is because I started my spiritual journey as a solo person, bachelor, where it was super simple. I just lived alone and I did my thing. And then occasionally at work, I would interact with people and then go home and meditate it off. And then when I got married, there was a little bit more inner work required because the partner could trigger us, our in laws could trigger us, our family could trigger us. So I wanted to continue approaching that very spiritually. And now it's like I'm ready for the next level of my life where it's like, how do you be spiritual around kids, those that are your kids? And of course, other kids. So I think you are such an amazing person to be talking to about this because you've shared the stories that you've had with your little one, which we'll go into in a little bit as well. But that's just where I'm coming from. So I'm happy to be learning from you today.
Well, thank you, thank you. I'm very happy to help you on your journey going forward. I think it's a very important point that you're making for young people getting ready to be a parent and preparing to be a parent properly. This is
Mm,
very important.
yeah.
Yes.
So as I dive into this with you, one of my favorite poems and poets is Khalil Gibran. I would like to take your permission to just share a little bit of that to get us started.
Great.
So Khalil says, your children are not your children. They are sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. So I feel like this just beautifully correlates to what you've written in chapter 10. And the first thing that really stood out to me was you shared about the three tasks of a parent: the role model, the coach, and the cheerleader. Can you help us understand more about what those are?
Well, okay. The people talk about your role as a parent. Should I try to be a friend of my child? Should I try, and tell my child what to do? But what I've seen the most growth between parents and children is when there's a role model there, and just living the life, you know, chasing your dreams, chasing your passions, and sharing that with your children, not trying to, you know, hide all the failures, but really share everything with your parent, with your children. And I found in my time as a father, those times when I shared the failures were the most impactful for my daughter.
Mm,
And you know, we don't, whether it's your husband or wife or your child, you don't want to be set up on a pedestal. Um, there's no learning that happens there. It just becomes adoration, and the learning is when we really share what's deep in our hearts with our children, and that allows them to open up to us also.
mm,
Yeah. Then as a coach, coach is a better word of, standing beside your child and looking for their talents, looking for their interests, and encouraging them to pursue those, the things that make them happy, not the things that make me happy as a parent, but the things that they're talented at, that they're um, gifted in, and coaching them, standing beside them, not standing behind them, not standing over them. Um, I was given a daughter who has talents that I don't understand, um, yeah, that I don't share, and so the only role I can take in there is as a cheerleader.
Mm.
Help find the right coach, um, but not be a passive participant. Um, I was talking to another young woman who said, you know, her parents let her do anything that she wanted,
Mm.
but they didn't really appreciate what I was doing. Um, they just let me do it. Being a cheerleader is, I don't understand what you're doing. I'm just in wonder at what you're doing, and keep doing it. Try to do it better, right?
That makes a lot of sense. I can relate to that because the third thing which you said is it's not just about letting the other person do what they want to do, but it's saying it's actually good that you're doing this. Keep it up.
Yes. Mhm.
That's a different level of acceptance. And I don't think it's just for kids, it's even for relationships, any kind of relationship, really.
Yeah, it's very strong in a marriage too, where you see that your partner is passionate about something that you can't relate to. It's,
Mm,
just go and do it, No, but
mm,
really get involved with enjoying that they're getting enjoyment out of what they're doing.
mm. That's amazing. And I feel so grateful because that's how my parents have been in this journey. They may not get all the articles, and my dad will constantly give feedback. You write too complex. And I'm like, it's I just appreciate that you're trying, Dad. And my mom will say the same thing. So I can see that they are the cheerleader in my life and how much that influences me. That's brilliantly said. And then one question that came out from the role model piece is you talk about sharing the struggles, and I'm always uncertain at what point does that vulnerability hamper the child's own perspective of the world, because I know that we have our biases, and there's going to be times where we're angry or upset or we're not liking a third person. We we don't want to take away from our child's authentic experience of reality or of another person, right? But it's what's the middle ground? How do you take care of that?
Well, it's a question of oversharing, but really, and trying to find the right things to share. Um, Too many people in general will talk about their successes,
Mm,
and if you go down that path too long, you end up on the pedestal again with your children. Daddy can't do no wrong, sort of thing. Um, so I think it's important to balance what they don't see,
mm,
um, with this authentic um, discussion, and those are authentic. We don't. You have to learn how to make authentic discussions. Um,
mm,
it's not something you blurt out at the kitchen table, or you need to find the right environment
mm,
to create that authenticity. And by doing that, you're teaching your child how to um, speak authentically
mm.
themselves. You're giving them permission to open their hearts up.
Yeah. I feel like that paired with the cheerleading would help the child become more authentic because one, you're letting the child know it's okay to make mistakes. And then two, you're recognizing where they show up, even if they show up differently in life. And it's like that's us creating more inclusion, even in our own in our own homes, in our own families, right? We don't need to be like a herd of sheep that are all the same color. And then the other person doesn't have to feel like the black sheep. It's like you can just be all colors of gray, whites, blacks, whatever works for you.
Yes.
Right? I love that. Thank you for
Mhm.
such simple examples, and they're hitting the spot for me. Another question that came forward for me was kind of around projection. And so there's this doctor I was telling you about before, Dr. Shefali Sabari. She talks about conscious parenting, and she has this wonderful course over Mind Valley that goes into the details of how do you become a conscious parent. One question that she asked really stood out to me, which was, what kind of child do you fantasize having? And when I thought deeper about the question, it basically implies that even before a child is born, we're already imagining and fantasizing and setting expectations of what we want from it. So for me, my expectation was, I don't have anybody to play with. I want somebody to hold and play. And I was like, what if the child doesn't like me? What if my child is like a cat that just doesn't want to be held and doesn't want to play with me because she's so independent? And it was just such a deep reflection as we all do this. We all project our desires on each other, and our children are no different. So I would like to know from your personal experience if there's any story you can share where early on in the day where you may have not had this much sense that you were projecting things onto your child, and how did you overcome that? What are some tips you can offer to us?
Okay. I mean, one of the things that I talked about in that chapter was a period that my daughter went through when she was 12 years old, and it was a very interesting story because it was the first day of the new school year, or it was the day before the first day of the new school year, and she walked into the um, kitchen where I was sitting at the table reading a book, and she sat down and she just said, she didn't say anything, and I said to her, "What's wrong? You look very depressed." And she looked at her weekly schedule for school and her after school activities, and she said, "There's not a single day in the week that's fun."
Mm,
Um, and you could just see it in her. She was completely depressed about starting school the next day.
mm,
Um, so I said, "Go back in your room, get a new piece of paper, and draw me the schedule that you'd like to have."
mm.
Right. And so she came back and she put it in front of me, and I said to her, "That's what your mother would like." And the reason I use this story, because it goes back to what you're talking about, is that um, I've seen this as my daughter was growing up. My wife was trying to project onto our daughter her desire to redo her childhood, right?
Yeah.
and and that's one of the typical ones that happens. They, not to make the same mistakes that they made in their childhood, and
Mm.
do it better. That's why I use that example because she showed it to me, and I said, that, yeah, that is what your mother would want you to do.
Mm.
And then I sent her back, and I said, no, go back and start over again. And she came skipping back, and she put it in front of me, and she said, "You're never going to let me do this." And I said, I looked at it. um, you've given up swimming. You're the top swimmer. You're giving up swimming. But she said, "I'm a great swimmer, but it's lonely."
Mm.
Right. I said, "You're giving up your violin." He said, I want to sing when I'm playing, so I want to play the piano. I can't sing when I'm playing the violin.
Mm.
Um, and then she changed her life around, and it made her very happy.
Mm.
But getting something something that you're really good at, but it's not giving you fulfillment in your life, it's hard to set that aside.
Yeah.
But yeah, but yeah, that projection, I see it a lot in my friends, and I promised myself I wouldn't do that when she was born.
Yeah, it's a tall order.
It it is.
Because it's one thing for us to just know that projection is a thing, which is huge of itself. But the second is, what about the unconscious projecting that we do, the ones that we aren't even aware of? So it's funny because there's this amazing doctor called Dr. Gabor Mate. Have you heard of him?
No, I haven't. No.
So he speaks a lot to childhood trauma, childhood development, ADHD, addiction, all of those lines of work. And I've been following his work for a while. And he will jokingly say this, but it is true that we are going to be very privileged as parents if we don't fully pass on our traumas and our challenges to our kids. So it's like, even if we can take care of a fraction of what we've endured and not pass that along, then we've done pretty well.
Well, that's true. I went through the Hoffman process, and that's what Hoffman taught, is trying to recognize those childhood traumas and how to um, try to overcome them and not pass them on.
Yeah.
It's a huge task. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that, yeah.
No, it's difficult because the same thing happened to your parents, and the same thing happened to their parents. It's
Mm.
generational, and the same mistakes get passed down generation after generation.
Yeah. That's another thing that always comes to mind is for somebody that may have never been modeled that level of freedom, where because the person themselves may have never experienced, the example you gave, which is like bring a sheet of paper and make your own schedule. And it may never occur to, like, even to me, it will never occur to me to do that. So I know that there is hope, but what can people do that want to be more conscious in their parenting? What are some, like you've mentioned Hoffman as one kind of platform.
Yeah.
Um, One I brought up was kind of Dr. Shafali Sabari. What are some recommendations that you could give us?
Ooh, that's a broad question. Um, well, I know a couple of kindergarten teachers who they love to go to work every day because they say, I learn so much when I go to work. And if you can take that approach, that you've, as your poem said, you've been given a divine being that doesn't belong to you. Um, but take that the step further and say, what can I learn from them?
Mm.
You know, and try to look for that wisdom that they bring into this world. Look for that talent that they bring into the world. It can be amazing
Mm.
um, to discover it. So the biggest thing that I can say is to be curious, um, and be curious about yourself. It is going back to the projection that you talked about. If you feel that coming up in you, then think about, where's that coming from. Why am I doing that? Why? um, and self curiosity and self discovery are the strongest tools that I've seen in my life, uh, which have
Mm.
given me the most growth.
Yeah.
In the end, it, the poem doesn't say that, but in the end, all the wisdom is there.
Mm.
It's here, and we can discover it if we can start peeling the layers of the onion back and
Mm.
start getting access to our inner wisdom.
Yeah. You know, on a rare occasion, every now and then, I'll follow these Montessori Instagram accounts where you can see when the kids are gently guided that they become these amazing human beings that even us adults aren't. Because they're already connected to themselves. So it's not like they're being retaught what intuition is or what being with your gut is. They already have that. They're encouraged to grow that. And now, on top of that, we're kind of modeling a compassionate parenting model, which helps them. It's like not always just given to your animalistic impulse. We're helping them shape that a little bit, but it's like now that they get the human experience, if we could have more children like that, the world would be so different.
Very much so, and being able to be curious about those children, the parents can start to learn something from those children too,
Mm,
um, because as you said, they don't have the baggage yet. They haven't learned the baggage yet,
mm,
um, and that's something Ken Robinson speaks about, is that the standard education system in the world pretty much destroys creativity because it doesn't it doesn't accept failure, um, and failure is a bad thing in most societies, but it
mm,
should be something that we cherish. You know, learn from it.
mm,
We'll do it different next time, but let's learn from what we do wrong.
mm. Yeah.
And kids naturally do that. They,
Mm,
you know, um, that's why I asked my wife when our daughter was born to promise that we would always be there to pick her up,
mm,
but never stop her from doing something.
mm. Yeah.
Okay. um, Not tell her what to do, and it was a very interesting experience seeing her grow up in that fashion.
Mm,
um, Knowing that her parents were there if something went wrong, but
mm,
um, still curious to do the things that kids do, and you learn from it.
mm. Yeah, like I mean, I'm thinking oftentimes, and I'd love to know what your honest opinion of this is, because oftentimes parents will say that the world of raising a child is just so hard. It takes everything away from you. They suck your soul. You need to go in the closet if you want to eat chocolate. And that just, for me, that does not seem like what would happen. And the reason this came up for me right now was because you said something where it's like, if you let the child just be, then you're not trying to puppet it and like almost like tell it, move your arm there, move it there. So you're not always engaged and then burning out because you're not trying to live two lives at once. You live you, they live them. And of course, like you're the caregiver, so you are there for support. But then I'm assuming that would be a little bit more easier, a lot more easier, right? And then parenting would not feel so difficult if people could get that.
I agree with you. um, it is, this it's one book, The Biggest Job You'll Ever Have, which I recommend a lot of parents read, and that is, helping you as a parent to understand what is my responsibility and what is my child's responsibility.
Mm,
um, and just saying exactly what you said, I can't live the life of my child, um, and I have to figure out what this space is. And a lot of people can't figure out that separation between what the child's responsible for, um, you know, and what I'm responsible for.
Mm, fascinating. It's like when these dots connect, it's like, can I hold on to this for like the remaining 30, 40 years that I have so that I can take this away? But I feel like there's just so much of value here. Um, Another thing that I had written down to ask you is, and you brought this up a little bit, is as the cheerleader, we want to encourage this child, even though we don't know what the gift is or why they're doing what they're doing. You wrote something very, I would say, eye-opening and a little bit controversial. So I would love for you to unpack more. So the statement you said is you children with special needs are a failure on the parents and teachers' part to recognize the diverse talents.
Yeah.
Could you unpack that for us?
Well, that was a part of a quote from Dr. Mel Levine, who um, wrote, well, formed the organization One Mind at a Time. Um, and he was or he is a um, doctor who works with learning disabled children. And he said, I've never found one.
Hmm.
Right. And that quote basically comes from him. He said, it is the failure of parents and teachers not to recognize the gift that the child has.
Hmm.
Um, Ken Robinson talks about this in his TED Talks that he does. You know, if the kid's fidgeting and not able to sit still and learn, well, maybe the child is a kinesthetic learner.
Hmm.
I am. I need to move. I need to move
Hmm.
to learn, right?
Hmm.
And maybe that child should be a dancer. Maybe they should do something where they have movement in their life, and they would
Hmm.
be happier if they had movement in their life
Hmm.
because that's the way they learn best. Um,
Hmm.
we talk about auditory learners and visual learners, but the kinesthetic ones are usually the ones given Ritalin or some other
Hmm.
um, ADHD medicine. But let them move.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I don't know if you notice this, but I have this habit of moving in my chair all the time.
Yeah,
That just made sense. And it's not because I'm bored or that I'm fidgeting because I need to move. That's how I learn.
mm-hmm. Yes,
I'm not a passive learner. I can't sit and watch videos. I can read more, but I feel like even my capacity to read has gone down. I'd rather listen while I'm running because
yeah.
I learn better that way. Oh my God, that makes so much sense. Wow. And I knew I'm kinesthetic in my learning, but I guess I just never connected the dot in that way. Hmm, brilliant.
Yeah. So by being able to recognize those characteristics that our children have, and this is what Levine talks about, is we can give them tools to help them.
Mm,
If somebody is really a strong auditory learner, and the teacher's always right on the board,
mm,
um, they're going to have a little trouble. But there are ways to overcome that. I mean, my daughter has her computer read everything to her.
mm.
Um, it at 2 times speed, I have trouble listening sometimes. But since she's an auditory learner, she can listen real fast and
Mm,
learn quicker through auditory than actually reading it.
I see. That is fascinating. I feel like that would be a whole conversation of itself. Hmm. I have one more question for you.
Okay.
So, I feel like the world has become more and more isolated, more and more individualized, to the point where we see a lot of nuclear families. Coming from India, the culture that we had is you live with parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts, and it was like giant family, 30, 40 people in one house. So it was that village. So when we say it takes a village to raise a child, you would have that village. People were there to look after. But now that responsibility is on, let's say, the two or even the one parent in this very kind of fast paced world, again, like you said, they don't even understand what their responsibility is. There's burnout, there's resentment, there's frustration. All of that obviously feeds into the child, and it can make the child feel like they're not enough, or that they're not, that their needs are too much, that they're not worthy of love, right? So again, there's a lot that happens, but it's like if we could nip it from the bud and we could encourage every adult to build their village for their child, and not just their child but for themselves, because I believe it also takes a village to raise an adult. um what would you what have you seen as the missing connection? Why aren't parents able to let go and, let's say, let a third person take care of your child? And how can we encourage more of that?
Hmm. Um, it's a new area for me. I really hadn't thought about. I've observed that problem,
Mm,
and I really haven't figured out, the best way to deal with it. We, I grew up in an environment where I learned from my environment. I was not supposed to be home until supper time. Um,
mm,
the out of the house, and I was raised by the neighborhood, by the village, as you said. And I felt very inadequate that I couldn't supply that to my child because the environment just didn't allow it. You had to make a date for,
mm,
two children to play. It's a very strange environment. And trying to do that through um, team sports where the children are exposed to different coaches, different adults who are maybe have different interests. So that's where I've seen with some of my nieces and nephews that they've found, that person who really understood them better than their parents do, because
mm,
it was a wrestling coach, or it was a football coach or whatever that they were able to connect with, and just supplying that opportunity um, for kids to meet other adults, or teenagers or older kids,
mm,
um, to see that if they can get a connection where you as a parent can't get that connection.
mm,
um, it's not a failure on your part. It's just opening your child up to those other opportunities. And it's sad, as you said, there's effects on all all sides, because without that village, as you said, people are dying younger
mm,
because they don't have that social connection, which is an important part of longevity.
mm,
Um, Being needed by others is
mm.
important.
Yeah, it's our biological need.
You know,
So one specific thing you said there was it's not a failure. I feel like that answers a big chunk of it, is when the parent begins to feel inadequate and they take it personally that they couldn't do this for their child or they couldn't do that for their child. Um, I know that we all have potential to do more for each other and for our children. How can people that can't meet all their child's needs, which is every single parent, um, how can they understand that it's not your failure, that it's okay, that you can't do everything?
that's a tough question to answer. It goes to self love, self respect, um, and understanding that we're all human. We have uh, our capacities. Some have more capacity, some have less, but those who have less, it's not their fault they have less. They just have um, less aptitude than others. And we should lean on other people, and we should get used to being able to rely on other people.
Mm,
And what every person is learning in college nowadays is the importance of networking, um,
mm,
and not just going to people who you need. When you need something, you go to the dentist, or you go to the auto mechanic or whatever. But just networking in general, just getting to know other people, um, and that can start as early as possible, um,
mm,
and you can help your child through just teaching them how to network,
mm. Yeah.
um, because the mathematical power of the network is very interesting to see. But um, these loose connections that we have, they surprise us all the time. Um,
Yeah. That's definitely a soft skill I did not have, and I'm still learning to develop because everything was so transactional, where
yeah,
it's like you said, you just go and there's a purpose, there's an agenda with every conversation. So even like today, um, I liked that you came in with the intention of checking in with me, and that there was what you said is like, let's just make it two people talking to each other,
yeah,
right? It's hard to remember that when everybody's very agenda oriented, but I can see the value in that because then it's then there's freedom in the relationship to move and to come back and to kind of explore. And then I can see from many of the connections I've made in the past, especially through this kind of work, is um, literally one of the people I did a guest collaboration with many years ago. She's moved to the same city, and she's literally working two buildings away from my partner's building. And now we're getting to connect with each other. And it's like, how did this happen? And there's our collaboration is done. We're not like collaborating, but now we have an opportunity to explore a different relation. So there's more room to grow together when there's no agenda all the time. And I think that would be valuable for us and for our kids.
yes, yeah. Just it's interesting how those things come back, as you say. They or you get a call from somebody who you hardly know, and you say, well, I think you should maybe talk to this guy. I met him here recently, and maybe you two will be able to, you know, collaborate together.
Mm.
The, the loose networking is a powerful thing,
Mm,
and
amazing.
you shouldn't have to wait to college to start to learn how powerful it is.
Yeah. But then again, we get to model that, or hopefully somebody else will model that to our children, and then they will have that naturally and they won't have to wait to be taught that and to unlearn and then learn networking.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing. So I would have loved to keep you for another hour because you have so much of wisdom to share. But I feel like we've taken a lot of your amazing time. So if there's any final thoughts that you want to share, those are welcome.
No, I really appreciate your intuitive questions on what you read. What I'm trying to develop this topic further and make it more accessible for other people. And so, anything that we can do in the future um, to talk about specific topics with parenting, and it is a hard road, and trying to teach parents at a younger age, there's no real tool for doing that nowadays.
Mm,
Um, they don't teach it in schools really, but this is something that we should learn. As you said, we inherit these projections and differences from our parents, and we should consciously not try and pass them on.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
um, but it's too late to learn it after you've had children.
Yeah. I say there's still hope. There's, if you start today, then you shape or reshape the tomorrow for your child. So
Yes,
I
that's
know
true.
a lot of the people that I've worked with, they are mothers or they're fathers, and they have this, once they start working on their own stuff, they realize that their kids have been quote unquote traumatized by their past behavior. And they have this whole phase of just denial and self loathing. And I hate myself for doing that to my kids. My kids must be traumatized for life. But it's what you kind of shared in the book. And I'm bringing this up more spontaneously, but something to the effect of brain development in the age of 6 or 7 is where it becomes complete. So if you do start early, it's reversible to the point where the child could grow up completely healthy, secure in their
Mhm.
attachment style, just because that you were willing to do the work. Even when they
Yep.
grow up, like that apology that the parent can make to the child can amend a broken heart and take away the resentment that all kids will have towards their parents. So yeah, there's a lot of scope for all of us.
Yeah, there is. And it wasn't really much later in my life that I learned the reason why I had such a childhood that I had. And it was to make sure that my daughter didn't have to have the same childhood.
Mm, yeah.
because I wouldn't let that happen to anybody.
Mm. I think you are doing wonderfully because I can see that in your writing and in the thoughtfulness that you brought into our conversation today. Thank you for healing and
Okay.
stopping
Well,
the
thank you
trauma
very
there.
much.
Yeah. All
Have a
right.
wonderful day, Vassandra.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.